Hey guys, welcome back. So as you can see, we have the engine here that we've been working on. It's mostly put back together, and then we also have a turbo sitting here. I'm going to go ahead and show you what we did so far to this engine. As you can see, there's a lot of shiny new parts on here, as well as some shiny new stuff on the turbo here. I want to show you something I ran into on this turbo, and that way you guys are prepared whenever you go to rebuild your turbo. That way you can order the right parts, so to speak. So I'll show you that here in a minute, but we're going to go over this engine first and show you some stuff that we did to this. As you can see, we have our new valve cover on here. We ordered a brand new Ford one. When it did arrive, it did have 2 dents in it that weren't in the box. We ended up getting it replaced because the one dent was right where this crankcase vent mounts, and we were worried about the O-ring not sealing. The dog box here, which is the crankcase vent, we call it a dog box, it also was rotting out on this seam. So we went ahead and also purchased a new one of these. But got all this put back together. We have the fuel bowl rebuilt. We have the rest of the water pump pieces on the oil cooler, new manifolds. But I'm going to show you some stuff that we do with these, and that way you can kind of get an idea of what you would have to do if you wanted to do this to your truck. But we'll go ahead, I'll grab the camera here, and we'll go over this engine real quick and show you why I did what I did. But also, at the same time, we're also going to show you some stuff with this turbo. That way you are aware of what you may have to do when you rebuild your turbo. We were running a billet thermostat neck from Diesel Site. A few companies make these. I went with the Diesel Site one because I was ordering other things from Diesel Site, so we went with this. No point in paying more shipping than you absolutely have to. So we have the water pump that was installed in the previous video with the timing cover. We went ahead, got our sensor in, make sure that you always put some sort of thread sealant on this. And then the heater hose fitting here, it has an O-ring. They give you a new one with the water pump. So we installed that. Our back pressure tube is installed along with our sensor. And we filled up the high pressure oil reservoir. However, we are running a Ford Motorcraft thermostat in here. It's made by Waller. Can't really find a Waller brand, so I always buy the Ford one. It's always the correct temperature. So this one has a curved neck. You can see our oil cooler here with the new gasket. We put the new ICP on here. And as you can see, we have our CNC fab lines on here. Now, I have another video installing these. It's actually, ironically, on a Super Duty truck. So you can see that these may be routed a little bit different. And we may end up rerouting these a little bit once we get the intake Y and the turbo on. But these are the final position for now. And then we went ahead and put on the glow plug relay. So this is the stand cord that we talked about in previous videos, and this is what we like to use on our 7.3s. Now you can see there's a couple washers under the bottom here. Now the washers provide distance between the stud and the body of the solenoid. That is why we put some washers under there. So that's the point of the washers. Otherwise you can cut the stud, but then it's kind of like a pain in the butt to get the nuts started, and it's just easier to put the washers in there. But rebuilt the fuel bowl here, the new CNC fab lines. This loom was off of the old high pressure oil lines. You don't need to install this. You can see that they're just abraded underneath. But this provides a little bit of protection for the lines and for anything that rubs against the lines. We replaced the Vibralock fittings on these fuel lines on all 4 corners here. And also, obviously, when we rebuilt the fuel bowl, new Vibralock seals on these lines. On the back of this engine, you're going to find some Diesel Site up pipes. Now, they're not tight yet because we don't have the turbo on. However, these are probably my go-to set. I know there's other companies out there that make sets, and they are either more or less money. However, these ones seem to fit the engine really, really well. The bellows are up high where they're not in the way of the head down here, so I like to use these. He also has a great reputation with stuff like this, so we just continue to use him. Then we have new Ford manifolds on each side. You can see the gaskets under there. And then when we do these, we also use the Ford OEM bolts because they are locking bolts. They are the triangular locking bolts. and I like to use those because they do lock into the block and you don't have to worry about them backing out. Rebuild oil cooler using the Ford parts. Only suggest using Ford parts for the oil cooler, and I have a rebuild video on that as well. And then we have our oil filter down here. Now it's not tightened up yet because we have to put oil in it before we get the truck going. However, it's on and done. Motor mounts are on. Came back sandblasted, painted, looked good. These are left and right, up and down, so make sure you install them correctly. One other thing that we do, as you can see, there's a little bit of oil around this plug here. And that's because while it's on the stand, I roll it from either side to side and I fill these oil passages up. What that'll do is that'll accelerate your ability to start this truck. Because usually, okay, now we drained the rails because we did the oil end rail plugs. So if you drain the rails, you're emptying out all of the oil. We've turned it over numerous times. We've emptied the oil pump. We also have emptied the reservoir because it was off. So we fill up the reservoir, we fill up each rail. And if you want, you can turn it over a couple times on the stand, kind of get that oil flow in places and then refill again. However, we put about 2.5 or 3 quarts of oil in this engine without adding any to the oil pan, which is nice. Because now you don't have to worry about having a low oil after you fill up your initial fill. This will also accelerate your start time. Another thing too is when we fill up the reservoir, you can take out both plugs. You can fill from this side and watch on this side, and then as it fills up, you can watch that it will actually go down the feed tube that's in here. So when it goes down the feed tube, it's actually feeding the oil pump, which is down here. Now your low pressure oil pump, which is behind the balancer here, when you have this feed tube filled, what it does is it puts oil down into the low pressure oil pump and then gives it a little bit of a prime, so to speak. That way it has something to push as it first starts. Also changed out the O-rings on the back of these fuel rail plugs. Keep in mind that you have either a tall or short shoulder. The later trucks do have the short shoulder, and I do believe the early trucks have the tall shoulder. The only way to really know is you got to pull it out and check it. But that's pretty much it for the engine here. We are waiting on some parts for this turbo. So the turbo. We are running the Wicked Wheel 2 here. Put the 360 upgrade in this, rebuilt it. Went ahead and did the deleted pedestal and also the high flow outlet here. Now, when you buy a turbo rebuild kit, the problem with the rebuild kits is they are mainly universal. Now they are for, say, a TP38 or a GTP38. These turbos are very, very similar with minor differences. However, this is the O-ring that goes around the compressor housing. It goes all the way around, seals the outside housing to the inside housing. All right. So that's this O-ring. These are the O-rings that come with the kit. These three. There's 3 different ones here. Now I'm going to put this one over here. Do you see the problem? Now this O-ring is the original. It's old. It has been stretched, so I can't reuse it. However, you should be replacing it anyway. But it's much thicker than these 3. Now that poses a problem. Now I tried each one of these O-rings on this housing. Each one didn't give me a good seal. You could tell because the housing went straight on and there was no resistance in spinning it, moving it, anything like that. You need to have a little bit of resistance on there. So when you buy a rebuild kit, make sure that you have the correct compressor housing O-ring, because not every rebuild kit comes with the right ring. So when you go to rebuild your turbo, make sure that you have the correct housing O-ring, and that would be the thick one on here. I've done 2 of these, and I had both that were the thick O-ring. I have yet to find a turbo that uses the thin O-ring. I've had these with RTV on them. They're usually a OBS turbo, but a lot of guys will just actually RTV these back on, which I don't suggest doing if it's supposed to have an O-ring. Now we do have the new wastegate here. As you can see, the old one rotted off. So we have to put a new one of these on. We can't put this on until we get the housing back on. Now, this is adjustable. You can take this and spin it and adjust it. Now, the old one obviously is also adjustable, but it's been kind of locked into its own position there. So when you go in to replace this, make sure that it is adjusted correctly to the same length as your old one, because that will affect your wastegate operation on the 99 and up turbos. Also, when rebuilding your turbo, you have the option to get extra bolts, okay? Always go for the extra bolts. These bolts in here, they tend to be problematic getting them in, getting them out. They rot because of just where they live their life. So, there's times where you'll round these bolts off, snap them off. They don't want to come out. You eventually get them out and you have to replace the bolts. So when you buy your rebuild kit, make sure you order the extra bolts. It's a minute cost for a lot less headache. Now the next thing, this will be the last thing we cover in this video today. On the back of this harmonic balancer, where it goes into the oil pump. Now, if you can kind of see in there, right here, you see that little red line. That's a new seal on the low pressure oil pump. Now, when you get a new seal, you get a new wear ring. So let's see if we can get you to zoom in on this here. See that groove in this wear ring? Okay, this is a wear ring that is on the back of the harmonic balancer. It is pressed on, has retaining compound, and is kind of terrible to get off of here. So I can tell that the front of the low pressure oil pump was leaking. It was weeping a little bit. It was wet, very dirty. And whenever we took the harmonic balancer off, we saw that there was a groove in this wear ring. So I had to end up purchasing a tool to get this off. The tool is well worth it because this ring is very, very close to the face of the balancer here. And there's no good way to get a puller or like a 3-jaw or 2-jaw puller on it. But whenever you pull your harmonic balancer off of here, always check to make sure that this wear ring doesn't need to be replaced, because when you do buy the seal, they give you a new wear ring with it. And the reason they give you the wear ring is for this right here, because it's a wear ring. The seal eventually wears into it, and that provides safety to the harmonic balancer, so you don't have to buy a harmonic balancer. But if you are replacing the front seal on your low pressure oil pump here, then you might want to be replacing the wear ring as well. And it is held on with retaining compound. You can kind of see it's a little bit green inside there, but so that's one thing I wanted to cover with this. It's something that's very often overlooked, just like the rear main has a wear ring. But that's the end of this video for you today. Wanted to go through and show you what we did to this and why we did what we did. These are all preventative maintenance items. Like I said, this engine only had 100,000 miles on it, but the STC fittings, I could not get the one off. No surprise, it didn't want to come off no matter what I did. I even tried to get it off on the bench and it still wouldn't come apart. So the quick connect fittings are not very quick sometimes. So we usually just get rid of them altogether, just go back to the old technology, which is your flared fittings here. These are tried and true. These also make it much, much easier to do diagnostics on your engine. This is what we got going on for here. And we'll do another video on this once we get the turbo back on, after it's put back together over there. And we will go ahead and get this set down in the truck, because I do believe he's bringing me the frame to set it down in, where they can go ahead and finish putting it all back together once they get the engine and back and the transmission and stuff. He said it'd be a lot easier for me to just drop it in for him instead of him trying to do it at home. That's the end of this video. I appreciate you guys watching, following along with our projects. I know the past couple projects have been 7.3 stuff from a Super Duty. However, a lot of this stuff does translate to an OBS. But thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.